Advaita Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Go Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Go Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi. Okay, so we're near the end of chapter 4. Vidura approaches Maitreya. Text 33, sorry. Viduro api udavach Trutva Krishnasya Paramatmana Kridayopata Deyasya Kamani Swagditani Cha Viduropya. Vidura, somebody else can do this. Somebody chant.
Vidura Yud Adve Shruta
Vidura Yud Adve Shruta
Krishnasya Paramatmana
Krishnasya Paramatmana
Kridayo Patadehasya
Kridayo Patadeyasya Kamani Slagitani Cha Vidura Api also Udavat from the source of Udava Shrutva having heard Krishnasya of Lord Krishna Parama Atma of the Super Soul, Kridaya, for the sake of pastimes in the mortal world, Upata, extraordinarily accepted, Dehasya, of the body, Karmani, transcendental activities, Slagitani, most glorious, Cha also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Vidura also heard from Uddhava about the appearance and disappearance of Lord Krishna, the Super Soul, in the mortal world, which is a great subject matter sought after with great perseverance by the great sages. Please repeat. Vidura also heard from Uddhava about the appearance and disappearance of Lord Krishna, the Super Soul, in the mortal world, which is a subject matter sought after with great perseverance by the great sages. Purport. The subject matter of the appearance and disappearance of the Super Soul, Lord Sri Krishna, is a mystery even for the great sages. The word Paramatmanaha is significant in this verse. An ordinary living being is generally called the Atma, but Lord Krishna is never an ordinary living being because he is Paramatma, the Super Soul. Yet his appearance as one of the human beings and his disappearance again from the mortal world are subject matters for the research workers who execute research work with great perseverance. Such subject matters are certainly of increasing interest, because the researchers have to search out the transcendental abode of the Lord, which he enters after finishing his pastimes in the mortal world. But even the great sages have no information that beyond the material sky is the spiritual sky, where Sri Krishna eternally resides with his associates, although at the same time he exhibits his pastimes in the mortal world in all the universes one after another. This fact is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Goloka eva nivasat yakilatma bhuta. The Lord, by his inconceivable potency, resides in his eternal abode, Goloka, yet at the same time, as the Supersoul, he is present everywhere, in both the spiritual and material skies, by his multi-varieties of manifestation. Therefore, his appearance and disappearance are simultaneously going on, and no one can say definitely which one of them is the beginning and which is the end. His eternal pastimes have no beginning or end, and one has to learn of them from the pure devotee only, and not waste valuable time in so-called research work. Translation. Vidura also heard from Uddhava about the appearance and disappearance of Lord Krishna, the Supersoul, in the mortal world, which is the subject matter sought after with great perseverance by the great sages. Hare Krishna. So, research. Prabhupada had a godbrother, Bon Maharaj. He was amongst the first devotees to go to the West on the instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in the 1930s. And he was a bit of a scholar. He was quite well known in the Gaudiya Mat as being a very nice gentleman. He was a scholar, he was fluent in several languages, and so he was asked to go to London and begin the Gaudiya mission there. So he went there, but after a couple of years then he was brought back. That's a long story, we won't mention all of it. But from that time on, he busied himself in doing scholarly work. He would meet scholars in the West, so they would come to see him in Vrindavan. He got some land and he set up the Vrindavan Research Institute, Oriental Research Institute. So Srila Prabhupada, because you can use the word in various ways, but Prabhupada made the comment that there's no question of research. This is not the business. Research means you don't know what you've got. You have to examine it. You have to, minutely analyze it. This is research. The Prabhupada said there's no research in the Bhagavatam. Whatever's in the Bhagavatam, that is the truth. That's all. And you accept it or you don't accept it. But we're not interested in research. Because the karmis are always researching because they don't know anything. They see the world around them. They don't know what it is. They don't know how it's constructed. They go down into the molecular level, atomic level. Still they can't find out what is the source of the manifestations in this material world. So that the source of the manifestations stated here, Lord Krishna, the Super Soul, is within the heart of every living being, is within the atomic, the atoms, and even in between the atoms. That's when you come to that conclusion, then all your research work is done. There was a few years ago, it's still running, there's a Large Hadron Collider. Anybody know what that is? Yeah. It's the multi-billion-dollar machine that they set up on the border of the Swiss Alps and Italy. And their idea is that they'll whiz the atoms, they'll split the atom That's what they want to do. The atom is recognized as being the smallest particle, but they want to split that and find out what they call the Higgs boson field of energy. If they can discover that, then they figure that they'll know how the universe works. So this collider was set up some years ago, and they were getting very excited when they started it up. They saw the atoms whizzing around in this machine. I think it's 17 miles around. It's a big machine. And they were getting very excited that we may be close to splitting the atom and finding out what the source of its energy is from within. So after some time, some news reporter was interviewing one of the scientists, and he was explaining how it all works and like this. So then ultimately the reporter, he asked the scientist, well, but you spent so much money, $10 billion on this machine. What is it for? What do you hope to get from that? And the scientist got very excited. He said, control. So this is their idea. They want to control the universe. Yeah, there's a field of energy. Nobody can identify what it is. But if you go down deeper and deeper into the macroscopic heart of things, then the idea is that you'll find out how to manipulate these atomic structures, change them around, become God, basically. That's their idea. So this idea of control and presence, it doesn't. Those who read the Bhagavatam, they don't need to do any research work. You simply have to accept it. That's all. The Bhagavatam states what the material world is made of. Here it's clearly stated that that field of energy that supports everything makes everything move. In science, you'll see that nothing is stationary. Everything is moving at every second. Time itself is a flow of movement. So this is the business of the scientists, is to try to figure out what this flow of energy actually is. What is it for? Where does it come from? Where does it go to? It's mentioned here in the purport here that at the supersoul at the same time is present everywhere, both in the spiritual and material skies, by multi-varieties of manifestation. So there's structure to it, there's movement, but it's not movement which is not useless, what's the word? Aimless, or willy-nilly, as we say in... it's got a definite aim to it. The universe itself is working under very strict principles of control. So the Bhagavatam identifies immediately what that control is. That control is the Supersoul. You'll never see him. You can build as many Hadron Colliders as you like. You will never actually see what is the source of the energy that makes everything move in the material world. And not just this one universe, Prabhupada's saying, but there are millions of universes. Nowadays it's become very fashionable to talk about multiverses. You've even got, comic characters like Spider-Man and the multi-universe. So their idea is that this multi-universes, they're somehow or another copycats of each other, or there's a lot of speculation. But they know, or they sense, that something is there that's making everything move. And whether you're in this universe or billions of universes, that presence, that energy is the source of everything. So as living beings, when we become connected to the Supersoul, then we immediately can understand what this material world is, what we are as living beings. We are the Atma, not the Paramatma. like this, and then you can figure out what you want to do with that knowledge. Knowledge means you understand as a fact or a principle of truth. You understand what this material world is and what we are as living beings. So in the search for, in the scientists' research, they're looking for that source of energy, the core energy of the universe. So here it's mentioned that that's the super soul. The super soul knows everything. He's everywhere. He holds everything, as they say, in the palm of his hands. This is the super soul. So those who are embedded in material nature, they have no information about the super soul. They don't know what it is. They don't know what we are as living beings. They don't know what consciousness is, or awareness of who we are, why we're here, where we could possibly be going, if we're going anywhere at all. This is the dilemma. They're bewildered by the material nature. So when they're enlightened, that means you come to the stage of bhakti. Because on other levels of realization, you cannot understand what is this material world. The super soul is the guide. And according to the desires of the ordinary living beings, then the super soul is moving. There is a purpose for this material world, even though it's temporary. That purpose is to facilitate the living beings, the small, tiny atmas, in their desires to be God. That's the mercy of Krishna. That we as ordinary living beings, we're what Prabhupada used to call the mastership, disease. It's like a disease. The mastership or control. We were in France in 1976 at New Mayapur, and Prabhupada met with the Gurukul boys. There were about 20, 30 Gurukul kids there, and they had a darshan one afternoon. They came to see Prabhupada. One by one, they were doing full-length dandavats just in front of Prabhupada's desk. Prabhupada was smiling to see it. They were learning how to be submissive to the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada then gave a lecture, which you kind of think would be suitable for adults, but small children may not understand. But Prabhupada knew that the message that Krishna is carrying in the Bhagavad Gita, that penetrates the heart. So as an example of the business of the ordinary persons who are busy looking for control, whether you're running a Hadron Collider or whether you're Napoleon fighting wars in Europe and halfway around the world, the business is that they're looking for control. There is control, but what it is, how it works, that they don't know. So Prabhupada had used this example before about Napoleon. Napoleon, of course, was well known as a ferocious warmonger. Once he got control of the government in France, then he went on marauding all the other countries, Italy, Switzerland, Spain, etc. And once he controlled, he thought he was in control. Once he thought he got control of Europe, the European countries, then he wanted to take his army to India, overland, because he'd heard that out of all the countries in the world, and the British were in charge of about 3/4 of it at that time, they heard that India was a place of fabulous wealth, and that was the source of the wealth of the British Empire. So they were going and looting and fighting with the local Maharajas, conquering them, and then taking all their wealth and riches back to London. So Napoleon, he heard about this, so he thought, now I've conquered Europe, because he never was able to conquer the British, which was his downfall. But he'd heard that they got so much wealth in India, so he was going to have his armies march there and capture it all. So these were his plans. Never satisfied. You've got this much wealth, not enough. You're looking at your neighbor, he's got more than you. So now you want to fight and take it away from him. Somebody else comes along, they want to fight and take it away from you. So like this mastership endeavor Prabhupada described, this is the business of the material world. There is no God in control. Whatever control is there is by the exertion of the tiny atomic particle souls. So if we can somehow or another conquer our neighbors, we become like God. Because we have no actual resemblance. I mean, there is spiritual resemblance, but in terms of the function, there's nothing that anybody can do to get that position as God. It remains a mystery. If there is one at all, what he is, what he does, how he runs everything, how everything is resting on his energy, that people don't know, but they're eager to find out. So just like Napoleon, after some time, he made a declaration that, Prabhupada actually was walking in the park in Paris, and there was a statue. So he asked one of the devotees, "What is that statue?" So they ran over. It was a statue of Napoleon, and there was a plaque on the base, and it said, "France is Napoleon, Napoleon is France." So Prabhupada laughed. He said, "So here is France, where is Napoleon?" He's gone, because he wanted to be a controller. He wanted to be the master of all he surveys, and beyond that. But actually we don't have the capability. It's demonstrated in every action and every thought and every activity that we get involved in that we are not God. We're not God. We're just small particles pretending, that's all. So this whole material world is a kind of like a playground for errant living beings that think they're something more than what they actually are. What we actually are subordinate servants of that Paramatma. That's all. We can do nothing beyond what the Paramatma allows us to do. If we need permission, or if we want to do something, we have to do that with permission from the Supersoul. If the Supersoul doesn't give his sanction, you can't do anything. So these material scientists, just like Napoleon, for some time they think that they're very prominent and eminent. But at some point in time, everything is lost. So what is that time? Time is the impersonal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one can stand in the face of time. Although it's unidentifiable in some respects, still its presence is there. There's movement. Not just on an atomic level, but on a universal level, there is movement. That movement is indicative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in this way, the Bhagavatam is taking us directly into the inner workings of the universe. And therefore Prabhupada wanted to make this presentation in Mayapur. The 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, cosmology of the Bhagavatam, to show people what the actual structure of the universe is about, how it works, at least our small area, how it works, how the stars and planets are moving in, what's the word, not cohesion,
Conjunction?
Sorry?
Conjunction?
I didn't hear you.
Conjunction?
Yeah, they're, there's this particular word I'm looking for. Anyway, they complement each other. But the stars, the planets, everything, it's all moving in what sometimes is described as the cosmic dance. Yeah, there's a precision, there's a unison in the planets, in the stars, going from the atomic level all the way up to the universal level. It's moving. So what is causing that movement? That nobody knows. That's what they're looking for. That's what they're spending billions and billions of dollars on. So they can somehow or another figure out how it's all working, how it's moving. And once you've figured that out, then you can do whatever you like. You can control the universe, manipulate it for your own ends. So this is the unfortunate position of modern man. They don't accept that there's a Supreme Personality of Godhead. They don't accept the eternality of the soul and the super soul. They think that everything is according to their own adjustment. Whatever we want we can do, we just got to persevere, spend a lot of money and figure it all out. And then we'll be the gods of this world. So this pursuit of becoming God, it comes from a very deep-rooted envy of the Supreme Lord. Envy, Prabhupada once described, there were two friends, they were talking. One of them said, "Oh, you know so-and-so?" "Yeah." "Well, I heard he'd just become a high court judge." "What?" "No, not him." "Yes, I heard it, I read it, it was in the newspaper, he's been gazetted, he's now a high court judge." "Oh, well, then he must not be getting any salary." The man's got, a position, it's been recognized, but the envious man, even if you've got something, they won't recognize it. "Oh, well, then he must be, doing it for free, just so he can have the position." So this is envy. So in the material world, everybody is envious of everybody else. Yeah, everybody. There's no one that doesn't have that tinge of envy, whereby you want to be better than your neighbor, or you want to have more than your neighbor. You want to have the wealth and riches of someone else. And even when you get all that wealth, as much as you can handle, more than you can handle, still you're not satisfied. Yeah, there's a number of gentlemen nowadays that have come up as the controllers of the internet. What's his name? Jeff Bezos. Yeah, and Elon Musk. These are now the superstars of, finance on this tiny planet. And they're what is their business? Trying to knock the other one down, that's all. Increase their own business, reduce the business of others. This is material envy. You're never satisfied, you always want more and more and more. And at the end of the day, even if you get, like, what's his name? Musk is worth about $44 billion, one person. He's got that much wealth at his disposal. It sounds like a lot, but in 50 years or 100 years' time, where will it all be? There'll be no more Elon Musk. He'll have been moved on by some force or another that he can't identify, and he'll be put into a new position somewhere else. He'll forget what he was in his last life, and he'll have to start all over again. So this is a material God. Yeah, it's all fake. It's all cheating, and it's based on envy. So those who are a little knowledgeable about the way that the universe works, they can only get that knowledge from the Bhagavatam. There's no other level of consciousness that takes us to the point where we can understand the innermost workings of the living beings in this material world. They just don't have the knowledge or the brain power to do that. So, just like Mr. Musk, he's got so much money, what will he do? It's just become a burden. Yeah? He gets more and more, he's acquired more and more facilities for his own use, but he's getting to a point where it's so much, it's just become a burden. They don't know what to do with it once they've got it. They have no idea about the purpose of this so-called wealth that they have. So in that way then, after some time, just like Napoleon, after some time he conquered so many countries in Europe, but he couldn't sustain it because you've only got a limited amount of energy. For each living being has only a limited amount of energy. In the material world, the most powerful living being is Lord Brahma. But he himself also, it's given the description, that he also is dependent on a higher source. And he can't see what that higher source is until he acts according to this sound vibration, tapa. When he sits in meditation, then at a certain point, the super soul, who's been invisible to him up to that point, he makes himself apparent. Then Lord Brahma is educated on what to do with the material energy that he's now found himself in charge of. So similarly in our situation, we can't do everything. We can't carry the weight or the burden of wealth. We are not the owners. The only person who can sustain that wealth is the super soul working within and without. So in that way then, we want to understand what we are and get out of ignorance. We want to understand what our real natures are and therefore what our real function is. Otherwise we're in blind ignorance. We may be temporarily a little bit, have a little bit of wealth, but it doesn't last very long. And somebody will come along and knock you off your perch, as they say, just like in Russia and Ukraine now. They were one, now they're split into different divisions. And that business has been going on. If you go the history of this planet for the last few 100 years or 1,000 years, the same business is going on. Simply fighting, trying to acquire more than what one's neighbour has and be the number one, be the controller. But even if we give all the wealth in the world to Elon Musk or these other guys, they don't know what to do with it. They have no idea how to employ it in a gainful way. What would be gainful is to get the knowledge how to get out of the material world. The material world is a structure and it's controlled by a force that they ordinary living beings can't identify. So we're in a position where we don't know, we know we're here, but we don't know what we are, we don't know where we are, we don't know what our purpose is. Ignorance is the greatest suffering. Yeah. To not know who you are, to not know where you're going, to not know what is around you and its function, that is the source of the greatest amount of suffering. As long as you're not on top, as long as you're not in full knowledge, you suffer one way or another. So that suffering condition is relieved by the intervention of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul, who acts within and without. He manipulates everything within the universe, he manipulates everything outside of the universe. And if we can find out our relationship with that Super Soul, then we can actually be happy, because everything then becomes revealed to us. There's no question of doing research, this business, School of Oriental Research. There's no research required. What is required is a submissive attitude in studying the literatures which are the representations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This Bhagavatam is not just any book. It's alive. It manifests in, Prabhupada says at the beginning, on every page of the Bhagavatam, Krishna is apparent. So if we have the vision and the knowledge to see that, then we can actually get out of this turbulent material world and return back to Godhead and actually fulfill the function which everybody recognizes as the ultimate function, that of love. Loving each other, loving exchanges between ourselves and the Supreme Soul. That loving principle, that is the function of this material world. So this is our endeavor in spreading the knowledge of the Bhagavatam, that we want people to come to a point, Prabhupada said many times, we just want people to be happy. There was a reporter that asked Prabhupada that question, and Prabhupada's reply was, the purpose of life is to be happy. So how will you be happy? You'll only be happy when you're situated in the truth. If you don't know truly what something is, then you can never be happy, because it will always change. And that change brings distress. So to get out of the distressful conditions of material life, we have to know who we are. We have to have real knowledge. So the Bhagavatam is that knowledge. It carries that knowledge. It may look just like, paper and ink, but actually the message that it carries transcends or permeates the whole material world. So that was Prabhupada's idea, that people should become happy by becoming knowledgeable about themselves, about this world, and about the Super Soul. And he wanted to demonstrate that in the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. That was his idea. The 5th canto is generally regarded as being the most difficult to penetrate in terms of understanding. We've been working for years. Actually, it goes in India, it goes back thousands of years. The sages and saints were the scientists of their day, trying to understand what this material world is. It's been going on for eons. So Prabhupada's idea was that we show this 5th canto to give people a glimpse or an idea of how things work together. And then we'll show that to the world. They'll become enlightened. When you become enlightened, then there's a possibility of happiness. But as long as we're in ignorance, as long as we're in darkness, then there's no question that you can ever be even comfortable what to speak about happy. First business is to become peaceful. After becoming peaceful, then you can become happy. So this is our endeavor. Prabhupada's intention in translating the 18,000 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That was his idea. If you look in the 2nd volume of the 1st canto that Prabhupada printed in India before he came to the West, then he mentions there that he started this endeavor of translating the whole Bhagavatam, even though he was, 66 when he started that work. And his friend was saying, why are you bothering with this? Practically you'll be dead before you get anything done. He just couldn't see the point in taking on such a huge task. But Prabhupada's reply was that this material world, the description, the Bhagavatam is the description of the material world. So if you understand the Bhagavatam, you'll understand the whole material world as well. So he in his preface, he mentions there that the living entities on other planets, just like the demigods, they have millions of volumes of the Bhagavatam. We've got one, 12 cantos. But in the other upper planetary systems, where people actually have some brain, and Prabhupada uses that, it's quite sharp. He says, people have a proper brain to understand. They have millions of volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam, because it's the description of the material world. So in that way, we want at least these 18,000 verses. Prabhupada was determined to get them out, because it gives the essence of what this material life is, what we are, where we're going, etc., etc. So no need to waste valuable time in so-called research work. Just hear from the right source. You don't have to try to figure it out yourself. It's already there. The information is already there. All we have to do is accept it and put ourselves in such a condition that we're receptive to the knowledge that's been presented. I remember having a conversation with a famous singer. So she'd married a devotee, but it wasn't working out very well. I spent about a week with them in 1985 in Switzerland. We were having a discussion. So she'd been chanting. She was trying to read it, but she said, when I take the Bhagavatam and I try to read it, I can't understand a single word of it. I just can't understand what it is, what it's saying. So this is the karmi. They can't understand anything, actually, because it has to be open and revealed to them. You can't do it with your own brain power. What you'll do with research, nothing. So it's not research. We're not researching, but we have to be open to the knowledge that's already there. It flows within and flows without. And if we're open to that, just a little bit, Chaito Darpana Marjanam, when the heart becomes cleansed, that's open, yeah, mode of goodness, then you'll actually understand, or begin to understand, what the Bhagavatam is all about. But if we're not submissive, if we don't use the hearing process, then we'll never understand. Yeah, it will remain a mystery to us forever. So, okay, it's nearly 8:30. We'll stop there. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Manibanda?
So, we understand Krishna has three aspects, Bhagavan, Paramatma and Brahman. So what is the actual function of Brahman?
It's the beginning stage. Let me just put these over here. Brahman, no features, just what they call the light. And within that, that's the it's the emanation of the energy of the Supreme Lord. So it prepares us, it prepares us for going up to the higher levels. First of all, we have to understand that there is an energy. There is, what's the word? No, my brain's gone blank. First of all, we have to understand that there is eternality, Sat, Chit, Ananda. So those three features go with the Sat, Chit, Ananda. When you're on the Sat level, your awareness is there, but it's not very specific. In the Brahma Jyoti, there's no distinguishable features, but it's there. It's the energy of the Lord. So that understanding that or coming to that level brings us to a point when we can take the next step, Sat Chit. Chit means knowledge. That means that there's actually identifiable aspects or features to it. And then Ananda, because you've now understood what the other lower levels are, then you can actually be happy. The Sat Chit Ananda, the Sat is eternality, Chit is knowledge, and then that produces naturally Ananda if you come to those stages. So the yogis, they're trying to seek out the super soul within the heart. The jnanis, they're trying to figure things out with their brains. So the actual understanding of what everything is, that comes when you come to the stage of Ananda, because that's the purpose of life, to be happy. but you can't be happy with a non-entity. You can only be happy with another entity. If we were to lock somebody up, let's say somebody's got a wonderful, like a Rolls-Royce car. He's just purchased it, puts it in his garage, and he doesn't do anything, he just looks at it. And what happiness will he get from that? But if he uses it, then it has a value and a function. So we have to, somehow or another, by cleansing the heart, the knowledge of what we are, Sat, Chit and Ananda, those three stages, it becomes apparent. So the first step in God realization, come to that Brahman level, that everything is eternal, nothing is temporary. Even the material objects that we see are eternal. They're not manifest in eternal shapes and forms, but in essence as an energy, a power source, if you like. That's the super soul. It's spread throughout. Then when you develop a clearer sense, it's more open to you. Then you come to the chit, which means knowledge. You start getting very specific about what you're meditating on. The yogis, when they sit and meditate, they meditate on the super soul within, but they don't recognize the super soul as being different from themselves. So they're also, generally speaking, the yogis are impersonalists. Even they see the super soul, they don't know exactly what the super soul or who the super soul actually is. That they have to go further and become more deeply aware of this material world. So there's some aspects, sunshine, Prabhupada gives the example. So the sunshine is like the rays of effulgence of the spiritual world. Does that help?
Well, ultimately it's quite difficult to, because I know Banu Swami described Brahman as no form, no qualities and no activities. To try to understand such a feature, it's very difficult.
Yes. Yeah. So step by step, you can't immediately understand the spiritual world, but you have to, gradually it's revealed to you. So Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. Sure. Sorry.
Just a quick comment. You were talking about the Hadron Collider and the particle they discovered. Yeah. So they actually refer to that particle as the God particle.
Yeah. Although most scientists don't like to refer it as being the God particle. They don't like that. They want a system which there's no mention of God at all. So to call it the God particle, it's like anathema to them. It irks them. Okay. Okay.
I was just going to say, Prabhu, we've got a rooster down at the bullock shed. He thinks he's the supreme controller of that shed. He's actually named Napoleon.
Sorry,
we've got a rooster called Napoleon down the bullock shed. And he thinks he's the supreme controller of the shed.
Who are we talking about?
Napoleon. That's the name of the rooster. Napoleon.
Napoleon?
Yeah, that's the name of our local rooster. So maybe that's where he ended up after all.
All right, we're going to finish there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.